What's up everyone, welcome to another episode. I quickly want to start this video slightly differently with a couple of words around this bike that we're going to be building in a second. When Winspace reached out to me a couple of weeks ago in regards to sending the frame over, I didn't really have any emotional connection to that bike because, I mean, as you know, I'm really in love with my steel bikes these days. I have a titanium frame that just recently arrived, which is ready to be built up. So these have been the things that really got me emotionally attached to them when it comes to projects. So even while I was building up the Agile, I thought that it's cool and everything. I mean, it looks great, but yeah, there wasn't any of this emotional connection that I'm sometimes referring to in some of my other videos. So all of this was true until I put the wheels on and I took the bike off the bike stand. And I mean, just look at it. So yeah, I think it looks amazing in this monochromatic look. I mean, it definitely looks fast, very inviting. I mean, this FSA stem integrates very well with this bike, I think. And yeah, I mean, I've seen this bike and this frame in other colorways and it didn't really trigger anything with me. But now, as I said, in this monochromatic black and white look, it really, I think it flicked that emotional switch for me. So yeah, even though I built this up with an l-twoo ERX and a 105 crankset and a 105 cassette, it actually turns out to be a way lighter bike than I would have expected. But yeah, more on that later in the video. So anyways, I just wanted to share my excitement with you at the beginning, and now you can dive into the build video. Enjoy. What's up everyone, welcome to another very exciting episode. Today we're going to be building up this beautiful brand new Winspace Agile frame, and we're going to be building up with an l-twoo ERX electronic shifting group set. For the cockpit, we're going to be using a nice FSA ACR stem, which is compatible with the headset that Winspace provides. And for the handlebar, I'm going to be using a nice Pro Vibe super light handlebar. And yeah, I'll just hope that when everything is nicely assembled here, it's going to look great. For the wheels, we're of course going to be using my favorite drive wheels, this time with slightly different dimensions. We're going to be 50 millimeters on the front and 65 millimeters on the back, because Elite Wheels recently allowed to mix and match front and rear dimensions. So I of course wanted to make use of that, because I think having a 65 millimeter rear wheel is going to look hot. Now, to kick things off, as I promised in the unboxing video, let's have a look into this frame with the endoscope and see how the carbon layup actually looks inside. Let's go. All right, so as I just recently got this endoscope, you see that my endoscoping skills might not be the best ones, but I still created a couple of stills which I think show nicely how this frame looks from the inside. And of course, in some areas like here, you see a couple of wrinkles here and there, but nothing that I haven't seen already on other YouTube channels that looked at brand name frames. But I'm also no carbon expert. To me, it actually looks pretty nice and smooth and clean on the inside. But if you're seeing these images and you're spotting something, definitely let me know in the comments, because I'd love to learn more about this area. So now let's continue. So now that we got that out of the way, let's get things started with fitting the fork. So we're going to be putting in the headset bearings and then fitting in the fork into the head tube, just to see on where we need to cut that steerer tube. And then we're going to go outside and cut it, and then we can actually start assembling the bike slowly. So let's get started. So to get things started, I'm going to be putting in the first bearing up here in the top. The second bearing goes on top of the fork with that angled part pointing upwards. So it should be sitting nicely on here. Then we're going to be guiding that fork through here. There we go. And now there's this little part which needs to be sitting inside the upper bearing, and it's going to stabilize the fork nicely. There you go. So now there's no more wobbling around. Let's make sure that that opening of that C shape is in the front, because this is where all the cables are going to be going through. Doesn't really matter that much at that point, because we're going to be disassembling it in a second again. We're just putting everything on there so we can mark where we need to cut the steerer tube. So now we're putting on the required top cap, matching it nicely in here. All right. And then we put on one spacer that's required that came with the FSA stem. And then we can put the stem on top of here. And we're gonna see how that's gonna be looking like. All right. Pretty nice. I think we're not 100% in here. There we go. All right, I think this is gonna be looking quite nice and very well integrated with that stem. We want actually the stem to be flush with this, with this upper edge of that stem here, not going up all the way, because there's gonna be this top cap sitting on here and closing it off. So basically the stem needs to end over there. So now we're gonna just quickly mark it roughly with a knife on where this position is. Here we go. And then of course we need to remember that we're going to have that expander plug sitting in there as well, which also adds, I would say, 2 to 3 millimeters in this case. So we'll need to basically just look at the marking that we've made and then subtract, I would say, those 3 millimeters from it, that in the end, once we inserted that expander plug, we end up flush or even a tiny bit below that upper edge. I mean, this is not compressed yet, but we see that there is quite a bit of a gap between the frame and the cover here. So Winspace definitely wanted to make sure that nothing is rubbing here. I think it could still use a millimeter less of a gap, maybe half a millimeter less of a gap to look a tiny bit more integrated and a little bit sleeker, but it's definitely fine. I mean, it's no big issue. I'd rather actually have there a tiny bit too much space than this thing rubbing and me trying to find a solution of how to space it out. But let's definitely keep an eye on that once we start compressing everything together. Maybe it's gonna reduce that gap a tiny bit still once we've done that. So yeah, let's quickly disassemble it and then I'll see you outside for some cutting. All right, so we're outside. First of all, always important, wear a mask when you're cutting carbon because you don't want to be inhaling any of that carbon dust. Not great for you. And now let me move the camera so you can see the fork. Okay, so what I like to do, luckily it rained a couple of days ago, so I like to put some water on the area that I'm going to be cutting so that that water automatically is going to be binding any carbon dust that gets emitted through from the cutting. Created, I don't know. So yeah, put a little bit of water on it and then get, I'm using a special blade which is made for carbon, which was working quite well so far. So let's do it. All right. Nice. So for the fork, it is important that we want to have a nice clean cut without any fraying parts. I see there are a couple of carbon fibers up here, so I'm going to be sanding them down a little bit, that everything is nice and smooth here. So smooth off those edges. All the way around, also from the inside. All right, that is looking good, feels super smooth. So we can go back inside. So now that this is done, I'm going to be routing the brake hoses that need to go through the frame. So in particular, the one that's coming from the rear through the down tube into the head tube. So I'm just quickly going to route them through. Then we're going to do the same thing with routing the brake hose through the front fork. Not that there would be any other fork, but I keep saying that. And then we can assemble the fork, put everything in here, and then we can also start playing with routing the hoses through the stem and the handlebar. But yeah, as I said, let's get started with the rear brake hose and navigate that through the frame. Let's see if we can just push it through or if we're gonna need my magnetic routing tool. But yeah, I'll give it a try without first. That would be nice, but maybe too good to be true. There's something. Oh, that worked. That is looking good. Okay, it is already here. Now that it's here, let me try to push it further up the down tube. So now that it's here in the bottom bracket area, let me navigate it up towards the down tube and keep pushing up here, hoping that it's gonna pop out. Yep. And up the way, guide it up the way. There we go. Fantastic. That is looking great. Just that little C cable protector fell through. So put that off to the side. And now for the cable to not rattle around while I'm riding, I'm gonna take one of these hose foam covers, and I'm gonna be putting this on top of the brake hose. That is looking good. Okay, and now we're gonna do the same thing for the hose in the fork, and then we can already assemble the fork in with the headset and then start guiding those hoses through the handlebars. So let's do that now. So here for the fork it should be even easier. There is a little opening here for the front brake, and there is another opening up here in the steer tube. So hopefully I'm gonna be pushing the hose through this hole down here for the brake caliper and hope it's just gonna pop up here. There we go. That's been as easy as it gets, I would say. So let's push this through. So now we'll take the bearing, we put on the bearing on here, so that's sitting nicely down here on the so-called crown race, I think. And yeah, let's start assembling it. Okay, so now we take the hose from the fork, we push it through here, through the bearing. We'll take that hose from the rear brake and push everything up here. There we go. Now we need to make sure that both hoses are sitting at the very front of the bearing. Next, we're going to be taking this little C-shaped part, which is going to be protecting the cables. We're going to put this over the steer tube, and we make sure that both hoses are in the front, so basically at the opening of the C shape. Okay, that is looking pretty good. Okay, also just another side note and a little tip. If you have those two hoses, the one for the front brake, it would be nice if you can route it on the left hand side of the rear one, because it's also going to go into the left shifter and the right one's going to go into the right shifter, so that's going to make routing just that little bit easier. So now I'm going to take my headset cover, and now I'm going to be routing the two hoses through that opening here first. So the one for the front on the left hand side and the one for the rear. Maybe I'll start with the rear one because it is longer. All right, and then the one for the front goes through here. Fantastic. And we put everything nicely together, make sure that it locks into this C-shaped protector. All right, that is already looking quite good. It's already holding on to everything, I think, if I let go. Yeah. Now I take that one little spacer that I definitely need to put the stem on so that it fits, and we do the same thing. We route through the front opening, the rear brake hose and the front brake hose, and also assemble it nicely together. There we go. And now we take our FSA stem. We're going to be routing the two hoses through this opening. That's going to help them to pop out in the front here then. So let me just guide it through that opening first. First the rear one, and then the front one. Okay, we see both hoses are coming out in the front. Let me just quickly pull on the front hose to give it a little bit more space. Now it's still easy to pull on it. It's gonna get definitely harder once it's routed through the stem because it needs to go through all the angles. So if you see that you need a little bit more, or you expect that you need a little bit more of hose to basically route it through the handlebar, you rather pull on it now than later. So now let me push everything through here. So now that we have everything routed nicely through the stem, let's also not forget about our expander plug. So let me just put this one in here while there's easy access. All right. And now we put the stem on. Hope it fits. Yeah, that is looking good. And now we see if we cut the fork to the right length, but it looks it's on point. Fantastic. So now I'm going to give that expander plug a little bit of torque, and then I'm just quickly going to test if this cap is going to properly fit and if it's going to be compressing everything down here correctly. Okay, so now we can give it a try if this is going to fit well, and if there's enough space for compression.
Let's hope so. Yes, it is compressing things down, and I can already feel that that gap that we've been talking about here got smaller because I just had my fingers in there and felt that it got tighter, and that is indeed looking nice. Let me see at the gap. The gap already looks way better. Let me show you. So now with everything compressed a little bit, you see that this gap got quite a bit smaller, and I would say it's really on point now. Nothing is rubbing, nothing is touching, but it's still nice and sleek looking. So yeah, sorry Winspace for judging you too quickly on that one. Definitely well done. Next, we're going to be routing those through the handlebars. So for this, I need to get those clamps off here in the front. So let me quickly do that. All right, so that's looking good. So now the tricky part's going to start. So while I love this handlebar because it's super light, there is one little issue with it that I just noticed, and it is the little hole that is here to put the hoses through is tiny. I mean, it basically barely fits. When I put those two hoses side by side, they just barely fit in there. Let me just get you close for that. Yeah, so they just barely fit in here. I mean, they do fit, but I mean, there isn't really a lot of wiggle room. I mean, there are other handlebars which have a way bigger cutout than this. Not that I need a massive cutout, but I mean, I would have wished for, I don't know, half a centimeter more or something. So I guess that by design, I mean, I was trying to find out because it says that it is a handlebar for completely integrated routing, but I don't know if they maybe just think that through this hole there's just a l-twoo cable going, right? Because I mean, it is a pro handlebar, so I mean, kind of makes sense that they prioritize the Shimano stuff, and that maybe normally the brake hoses would go through these holes, so it would be kind of semi-integrated. I don't know, but that's the only one that I have here at the moment, so we'll definitely try to make it work, because I mean, they do fit through, so it might be a little bit of a hassle, but I think it should work. So let me get my cable routing kit, and then yeah, we'll give it a try. So I'm basically just gonna take the routing kit and route it through the hole, push it down this way, and hope that I'll be able to just fish it out somewhere here. Oh, lost it again. There it is. All right, so now I'm gonna screw this bit in into the hose and then pull it through up till here, which should be fairly easy for now, because now there's still space in the hole for one cable or for one outer hose. But let's see how the other one is gonna work. So let me do this real quick. So this is the left one, so front brake. Let me just make sure that I got them right here. So this should be this one. Let me screw this in. All right, so now let's see what's gonna happen. Front brake going to the left hand side, so pushing and pulling. Can't wait how this is gonna work for the other side. I'm gonna be very happy if this works out at all, to be honest. Okay, I can see it already. This is just how to grab it. Yeah, there we go. All right. So, first one done, that was the easy one. So now let's see how it's gonna work with the rear brake, because we're gonna have to push it all the way through next to this cable. I wonder, maybe I'm gonna add a little bit of grease to that outer cable here, so that it at least slides through smoothly. So let me just apply some grease real quick and apply it to the cable or the outer hose and the area around it here. There you go. So that everything hopefully smoothly slides through. So now with this one, Well, first I'm gonna screw in that adapter here, and then I'm gonna guide the cable through the handlebars. All right, so let's see if we can find, okay, it should be here, so I should be able to fish it out with this one. I think I have it. Yep, that is looking good. So here's the cable. Now the fun begins. Let's see if we can fit that brake hose through here. And it should work, but it's gonna be tight. Ah. All right, so what happened? Ah, great. So that piece that screws into the brake hose just broke off. Let's see if this now makes it an impossible mission. Mission impossible. We'll keep trying. Let me see if I can screw in that little bit of remaining thread that's there into this. Yeah, just going in slowly but surely. Now, let's get that wire in again. All right, here we have it. I mean, I guess that's what's interesting with those kind of YouTube videos anyways, right? Where you want to see stuff that's not going according to plan. Well, I mean, it would be kind of boring if it would just go all smoothly and stuff, huh? Oh, maybe. Oh, it moved. It moved. Oh, something's happening. Look at that, look at that. I can already see the adapter here. Yeah. Oh, I can't believe it, the hose is through. Whoa, it did work. Whew. Okay, so I can unscrew that adapter. Just that tiny little piece saved the day. Thank you, AliExpress parts. Now I can push both through at the same time. I think that's already gonna work. Beautiful. So let me now get some carbon gripper paste, and then we can already put the clamps here on the front and stop worrying about, hopefully, stop worrying about internal cable routing. In case you're not aware, this is basically like almost like grease with some small carbon particles in there, which increases the friction when you're clamping things, which means that most of the time you don't necessarily need to torque things up to the maximum value, but can go a little bit lower than that, which is always helpful, especially when you're dealing with lightweight components. So let's also put some here and on the other side. Wow, I'm really happy that that worked. I was already prepared for this to be a showstopper for this project and me having to wait now another week before another handlebar arrives. So yeah. All right, so on the clamps, it says that there should be no gap at the top. And then on the bottom, we torqued it up to specification. I still need to look up what the specification is for this. But for now, we're just gonna attach those clamps and roughly align the bars, because I always have a little bit of an issue with aligning the bars while it's on a stand. Most of the time this ends up for me with the bars pointing upwards, which is of course something that we don't really want. So I'm not gonna be, I think, torquing these up to specification just yet. We just want them to like not be moving around too much and be at least roughly in place. So we tighten it up at the top so that there is no gap, as it says. It says 6 Newton meters on the clamp. I mean, it would be nice to go a little bit lower than that. So I guess finally I'll be aiming for something like 5. But for now, as I said, let's just roughly tighten it up so that it doesn't move around too much. Say this looking quite nice. I mean, what do you think? I think that FSA ACR stem works very well on that frame. Looks nicely integrated, even though initially I thought that I would have preferred to have an integrated, complete integrated cockpit, like a one-piece handlebar. But this definitely made it way easier to install. I mean, given though I didn't think about that this hole is going to be so tiny on the handlebar, but still it makes installation a little bit easier, and I think it looks great. I mean, it looks a little bit like they designed it for this, so which I guess they did with making it ACR compatible. So I'd say now is the time to attach the shifters. As I said, it's going to be an l-twoo ERX group set. So let's start with the right hand shifter. Pull back the cover. Let's see if the clamps are really loose enough to get on here. Yes, that looks good. It's also nice about that handlebar that there are some markings on here on the side, so I can basically just count the markings and then do exactly the same on the other side, which will help me to keep them well aligned and leveled to each other. So I'm gonna go for the second bigger indicator. All right. That should be for now good enough. We can still move it around a little bit if we need to. So now we're going to do the same thing for the left hand shifter. Again, peel back the cover. And here again, we're going to look at those indicators. I'm aiming for the second big one. Yeah, it's not really easy. It's not really easy to reach these bolts because of the rubber cover, even if you pull it back quite a bit. But what I can recommend is, I mentioned that in another video already, is to have these kind of tools with this little indent in here, which helps you to get basically a little bit almost like around the corner without the risk of rounding off your bolt. So I can basically just slide in like this and then get into the bolt. Okay. That looks good. So I think we're good with the shifters. Now we can connect the brake hoses. So to give a little bit more background info on how this is now actually going to work. So of course the whole system is going to be filled up with hydraulic oil, hydraulic fluid, but the way how those hoses connect to the shifters without any air or oil leaking out anywhere works in this way. So at the end of the hose we're going to be inserting this little metal pin, and then there's going to be this thing, basically like this little bolt which screws into the shifter, but between the bolt and the shifter there's going to be this little part which is called an olive. So now let's say my fingers are at the end of the shifter. If I then start tightening this bolt, it will compress and crush this little olive, so it will expand off to the sides, and with that create an airtight seal so that no oil is leaking out anywhere, and it's also not sucking in any air from the outside. So now with this knowledge we can move forward. We're going to be cutting those hoses to length so that they're just about the right length to fit into the corresponding connection ports on the shifters. Then we're going to tighten everything nicely up, and then we're actually good with the front end of the bike. And to make this work and to install those hoses into the shifters, there are going to be two very particular tools that I'm going to be using. This one first is by a company called Jaguar, but there are, I'm sure, also various other companies out there which do the same thing. And it is a guillotine. So I don't know if you see this, but there's a little knife, exactly, a little guillotine coming out here. So you place the hose where you want to cut it in between here in this orangey yellowish kind of part. Then you compress it and it gives you a very, very nice clean cut. And then there's this other tool, also by Jaguar, which is there. You've seen that metal pin that I was talking about. This is here to actually insert this pin into the hose. So you basically clamp the hose in here, you insert the pin on top, and then you push it in to the hose to actually, nicely compress it in there so everything is nice and tight. So, I mean, I'm sure that there are also a lot of other companies than Jaguar, but yeah, you need some kind of tools which would, do those two jobs for you. So first of all, we're going to work with the left-hand shifter. So I'm going to be cutting this brake hose to length to be inserted into this port. We don't want it, of course, we definitely don't want it too short, but we also don't want it too long because we can't really, as you see, we can't really push that much of axis hose back into into the handlebar, which is normally a nice buffer where you can basically just push things in if you've cut a little bit too long. But we're going to be cutting it in a way that we now push a little bit in, that we can rather pull some out if we need to. It also needs to insert all the way into this port. So I'd say the end is somewhere here at the end of this bolt. So we'll calculate with that. So we're going to be cutting it somewhere here. Our little guillotine, and cut it. Nice. You also want to make sure that that opening that you cut is nice and round. This one actually looks really good. If it doesn't, you can always go in with like a toothpick, or I'm sometimes also using a corkscrew to basically open up that hole, because sometimes it also gets compressed and it needs to be nice and round for that pin to actually properly go in. So now let's insert the pin. All right, let's clamp it. And let's see if we can drive that pin in. Going in. All right, that's looking good. Nut does fit well, that's good. And now let's see the olive. Olive also fits, luckily. All right, now we can put the brake hose into the shifter, just like that. Push the olive in. We also want to make sure that the cable is all the way in. And then we basically start threading in this bolt by hand first, because we want to make sure that we're not cross-threading anything, so it should go in rather easy. And then we're going to be tightening it with the tools, of course. All right, so finally, after moving back and forth a lot, I've found the right angle to insert it without cross-threading. So now we're going to be tightening this up. Now I'm going to use my favorite tool here, grabbing that part with the pliers and then tightening that bolt up. Okay, that should be good enough. So one shifter done, same thing on the other side. There we go. What I'm actually going to try now on this side, as it's going to be the same challenge in getting the bolt in here at the right angle, I'm actually going to do it the other way around now. So what I'm now going to try is to actually insert the olive already first into that shifter and that bolt as well, and just screw it in lightly, that I know I'm screwing it in straight without cross-threading. And now I'm going to try to insert that hose into the system. Okay, now I can insert this, move it up. Now the question is going to be, did it go all the way in? But I think so, because it just went a good portion just went in. I think that should be fine. All right, I think we should be good. Just to check. Yeah, that feels pretty tight. All right, that should be good. So I think we're done with the shifters, so we can move that rubber piece back for now. Next up, let's install the front and the rear brakes. So for the brakes, the l-twoo system comes with these little adapters. So this one says front and it says up. So yeah, I mean, this is the way we're going to be mounting it, and we know it's the right one because it says 160 here, and we want to be using a 160mm rotor on the front and a 140mm rotor on the back. So let's mount the adapter and then mount the brakes on top of it. Before we tighten this completely, let's attach the lower screw. All right, so adapter is done. Let's attach the brake. So front brake with the opening, obviously pointing to the top. So let's get that one screwed in here. And the bottom screw. These ones, we shouldn't be tightening them all the way in, but so that the brakes are still moving around a little bit, because we're going to be aligning them to the discs, so they need to be floating left and right a little bit. Now let's do the same thing for the rear. Here also we have an adapter already mounted to the rear brake. It says rear, it says 140, so it is the rear brake. We want to mount a 140 millimeter rotor, so this now goes on top of here. And let me just attach the screws by hand real quick. We'll screw them at least in a little further. But as with the front, we also don't want to tighten them completely, because we need also the rear brakes to be freely moving around like now, so that we can properly center them. So now here on the rear, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to be shortening the brake hose and attaching it to the brake itself, doing the same thing as for the shifters. So basically putting the nut on, putting the olive on, driving the pin in and screwing it in. So let's get going. So as you see, the good thing here is that we have a little bit more leverage in regards to if we cut a little bit too short, we might be able to pull out a little bit of hose. If we cut it a little bit too long, we'll be able to compensate and push it into the frame. But of course, we don't want to be having too much excess hose floating around in the frame, because there is a risk that it's gonna create noises when rattling around. So and yeah, of course, we also don't want all those extra grams that like 2 or 3 centimeters of hose are gonna be creating. Let's do our best with cutting it to the right length. Let's say I'll cut it right here. All right, so here, for example, we have a hole or a cut that didn't result in a 100% smooth around inner hole. So I'm using a screwdriver to just round it up. Okay, that should be good enough. Put the pin in by hand as far as we can. Now we get our pin driving tool out.
And this is the moment where my microphone died for some reason, so now I'm coming to you from the off. So yeah, for the rear brake, after installing the pin, we're inserting the olive and the nut into the brake itself, and then also nicely tightening everything up with the wrench. And then we're going to be moving to the front of the bike and actually going to be doing the exact same thing. So we're going to be cutting the hose, we're inserting the pin, then we're putting that nut on as well as the olive and putting everything into the brake itself, tightening it up nicely with the wrench and making sure that the hose is not slipping out of the brake. And here I'm saying something very, very funny, plus that we're going to be installing the battery for the derailleurs next.
All right, so before putting in the bottom bracket, I want to use that space still in empty state here. I'm going to be installing the battery, especially the cables for the battery, which are going to go to the rear and to the front derailleur. So that's going to be easier without any of that mounted so far. The battery is going to be sitting in the seat post, so which is also why I now hang this frame off of the top tube. If you're doing this at home, please make sure to never clamp onto the top tube, especially of a carbon frame, because it's rather delicate over there, which is why it's only hanging here. You see that the clamp is still open. So yeah, now I'm going to use my magnetic routing tool to route those cables into place. Let's go. All right, so now I'll try to just attach this cable to this end, and yeah, by taping it to it. There are normally ends for this to actually attach a Di2 cable to it, but as the l-twoo cables are a little bit of a different design, that unfortunately doesn't work, so we kind of have to hack something together, but I hope that this is going to work out. So let's try this, wrap it around. Okay, and now let's see if we can pull it through. That's looking good. Okay, so first cable done. So now I'll try to do the same thing for the rear. So let's see if I'll be able to guide that cable all the way in here to the back. Can I Where is it? There it is. All right, here it is. So now we got to do the same thing. We attach the long cable, by this little tape to it, and then hopefully put it through. Take the tape. First of all, I'm going to attach it to this part. Let's pull it through. At least let's try. All right, nice and slow. There we go. So that worked out nicely. Now I can take that tape off and we're good. So now the battery, as you see, I already wrapped a little bit of bubble wrap around it, and this is because it goes into the seat post, and that bubble wrap helps it to not fall out and have a little bit of resistance. So it sits in nice and securely in here. So now I can basically take those two cables and attach them to the battery. To mount actually the seat post back in, there's this little wedge that you need to install. So basically that screw that's pushing against the seat post for it to not slip is pushing against this metal wedge, and this is basically pushing against the seat post. It is a little bit tricky to fiddle it in without it falling down the down tube. Not that that already happened like 3 times. So let me tilt the bike a little bit forward so gravity can help us. All right, so let me put that wedge in here. That's looking good. Now let's fiddle in those cables. All right, and now we can put the seat post in. Nice and easy. Now we can bring back the bike into regular position. All right, so it's time for the bottom bracket, and from my previous builds I learned a very hard lesson about T47. So while I love a T47 bottom bracket, I learned that there are multiple standards within the T47 standard, especially a T47 with external bearing cups and then a T47 with internal bearings, so basically just closing off flush with the frame. And I hope this frame is needing one with flush and internal bearings. And also what I learned on my previous build, where I needed a T47 with internal bearings but only had a T47 with external bearings and the correct tool for it. I also noticed that when switching to a T47 with internal bearings, you also need different tools than for the one with external bearings, which was causing a lot of delays on the previous projects. But now I think I have all the tools I need. But just for you to know that in case you're playing around with T47 or even think that maybe your BSA similar looking tool is going to fit a T47 bottom bracket, it definitely doesn't. So I'm using this one from Park Tools, and then I'm using this rather generic one to basically tighten things up. I'm using this one because it has 2 sides with 2 different amounts of notches, because at that point I didn't really know what I need, so I ordered everything that I could get my hands on in the meantime to just not cause any more delays for the previous project. But now let's get started and let's mount this T47 bottom bracket and hope it's gonna fit. So let's install the bottom bracket. The right hand side has a little R on it, which is the drive side. So I'm going to be putting this in. Also already nicely greased up everything here. So it also has an arrow which direction to turn to tighten it. As always, make sure that you can tighten it by hand. So that kind of guarantees that you're not cross-threading anything. This one goes in nice and smooth. And then for the final turns, I'm using this beautiful Park Tool BBT47 with this side. And turn it, thread it in until it's touching the frame, or as far as I can by hand, which is about here. And then I'll do the same thing on the other side. All right, so now we'll use this tool to tighten it up. The torque spec says 35 to 50 Newton meters. I'm actually not really using a torque wrench for this because 35 to 50 just means really, really tight. So let's do it with this tool here. Oh, wrong direction. A little more. Okay, same thing on the other side. All right, that seems pretty tight. So now let's get the crankset in. All right, so for this, I'm gonna be using this new Model 105 crankset. Fits nicely. Let's see how the other side looks. The other side looks pretty good, I'd say. So now we can attach the other crank arm. All right, let's make sure to put that protective pin in, which helps to basically keep the arm securely on, even if those bolts get loose. Now let's take the preload screw or preload bolt, whatever you want to call it. Normally there is a tool for this as well, but as it only requires, I think, around 1.5 Newton meters, which is pretty much finger tight, I'm just doing it like this with just squeezing my finger in and then twisting it, and that should be tight enough. So now we can tighten up those bolts here. The specification for these bolts is 12 to 14 Newton meters, so I'm gonna set my torque wrench to 12 and then overshoot a tiny bit. So 12 is here, there we go. Okay, that's 12. Other side. That's 12. Let's try this one again. Okay, and again. Okay, let's tighten this one as well. Again. Okay, that feels good. All right, time to put on the derailleurs. Let's start with the front. Let's take that derailleur. Attach it here. Let's also take that power cable and attach it where it needs to go, which is here on the side. Okay. And now what we want to be looking at when adjusting the height and position of the front derailleur is that between the bottom edge of this blade and the top part of those teeth, we want around 2 to 3 millimeters of space. So let's say something around here. And then before properly tightening it, we also want to make sure that that this cage is parallel with the big chainring. So we set it up to be parallel, we hold it in place, and then we tighten up this bolt. All right, front derailleur done. So now for the rear derailleur, we're going to be mounting this one in here. I already put a little bit of grease on those threads. You see that there's also this little notch in here, and there's this little pin looking thing here. So this pin needs to sit on top of that notch. So that's basically the only thing that you need to make sure when mounting it. So let me screw this in. All right. Then we can take the cable and attach it to the derailleur. So now let me quickly see if it's working. That's looking pretty good. Front derailleur. Nice. So now we can put on some wheels so it can finally start looking like a proper bike. Let's give it a try. Nice 65mm Elite Wheels drive. Okay. Push this through. Let's tighten it up. All right, front next. And also tighten this one up. right. So yeah, I think you cannot really argue that this is definitely a really nice looking bike with a nice dropped stay here, 65mm in the back. Looks pretty hot. All right, next we'll fit the chain. This is actually a recycled chain that I've just cleaned and waxed coming from another bike project, and it has already been shortened for this other bike. So let's see if this is gonna fit this one, or if I'm gonna need a brand new one, or if it's maybe even perfect or too long. So let's find out. So I'm gonna be fitting it onto the small ring in the front. And also the small ring in the back. So on the ERX, the lower pulley wheel is actually a narrow wide designed pulley wheel, so every other tooth is a little bit thicker. So you need to watch out that basically the thicker tooth go into the bigger spaces in between the chain, while the thinner ones go into the thinner spaces. So let's see. So luckily it looks like this chain is a tiny bit too long. So we're gonna shorten it by two, I would say 2 links. We're gonna take 2 links off, and then I think it should be perfect. So it's gonna have a tiny bit of tension when it's a small cog and small front chainring. All right, so I'm gonna be taking 2 links off here. Process that you've seen, I guess, multiple times already. Pretty straightforward. Just have to center in on that pin that you want to push out, and then push it all the way through. All right, that should be it. 2 links off. So now we can take 2 so-called quick links to put the chain back together again. So we attach them on one side on this end and on the other side on this end, and then we can link them together. But they need to be interlocked, so there is other little tool for this, which looks like this. So now I basically just go in here where I put the chain links and I pull it apart until it clicks in. Now it's locked in and we're good to go. So now we can do a quick indexing check. So let's go to the big ring in the front. And let's shift through in the back. 1 up, 1 up, 1 up, 1 up, 1 up. Hesitating a little bit. 1 up, 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 up. Oh no. We definitely don't want it to fall that far. So we need to be adjusting the limit screws. So if you ever run into this issue, there are 2 screws here. I mean, I think you can also set it up in the software what the limit actually is, but you're always safer if you set it on the hardware physically. This one is the one which sets the absolute limit for when you're shifting up to the biggest cog, and this one is setting the limit when you're shifting down into the smallest cog. So let's adjust this one a little bit in, that it's not going to allow the rear derailleur to push that far into the cassette, that the chain is going to fall off and actually touch the spokes, which we absolutely want to avoid. All right, so I've done a tiny bit of adjustment in the l-twoo app to basically calibrate and index the cassette. So let's give it a try. I think it's looking pretty good right now. If you're interested in finding out how this works, I mean, I've covered this in 2 or 3 of my other videos. I'm going to link one of them up here or up here, so you can check it out. But yeah, let's have a look how it shifts. Up, 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 up. Nice, and going down, 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 and down. I would say that looks good. So with this now, we're officially down to final touches. I'm going to be installing this saddle here. It is a full carbon saddle from AliExpress, so it doesn't have round rails. These are oval rails, and the seat clamp that's mounted here by default is for round rails, so for metal rails. But luckily, the Winspace bike also comes with replacement rail mounts. So we're going to take these ones off, put the new ones on, and mount the saddle. So to do this, we first got to take this clamp off. So you gotta unscrew these 2 bolts here. All right. Okay, these are 2 bolts that are mounting into each other. So now basically there are a couple of components here. There's this inner ring which goes into the seat post, so we definitely need to keep that. But on this side we have the clamp for the round rails. So we're gonna be swapping this one out first with the one for the oval rails, and then we're gonna do the exact same thing on the other side. We put this back together, and we gotta do the same thing here. So we're gonna swap the round one out for the oval one. All right, so now we gotta put this back together. Let's find where the screws meet. All right, and let's start screwing it in again. And then we can take our saddle and place it in here, in those rails. There we go. That's looking pretty good. And now we can tighten those bolts back up. All right, so I'm not going to be tightening this fully up because I still need to do a little bit of bike fit, adjust the tilt and the fore and aft once I have the bike on the floor. Now it's time to quickly align the brakes with my favorite Berssmann brake alignment tool. Let's go. So for this, we take this tool, put it on top of the disc and slide it into the brake, in between the brake pads. There we go. Now it's in there. So now we gotta push the brake lever. That should now be centering the brake, which should be. Let's see. Let's take the tool out. No more disc rub. Same thing for the front. Okay, one after the other, slowly, not all the way. All right, let's take it out. There we go. Now it's nice and smooth. So final step before we're tightening up those handlebar bolts, and then of course check the weight of the whole build, is to add some bar tape. So as I'm not the best with wrapping bar tape, I'm not going to teach you on how to wrap it. There are way better resources on finding out how that actually works. So yeah, let me do a little time lapse here. There we go. Looks good. All right, I mean, look at this beast. So let me just do the final tweaks of aligning the handlebars to the front wheel. So there are supposed to be 6 Newton meters on these bolts. Let's go with 5 first. So what do you think? How do you like it? I think it looks way better than I thought it would, because I've seen it in some other colorway before and it looked good. But I mean, this one now, so monochromatic, black and white, looks really good. And this is not even the drive side facing you. So let's torque these up. Let's make sure it is 5 Newton meters, yeah. Okay, 5 here. Top one. And check the top one again. Okay, so same for these ones. So let me twist the handlebar into position. All right, I think that looks good. Is it centered? Yes. So let's tighten these up to 5 Newton meters. 5. Fantastic. So that is a done build. There's still one question remaining, and it has to do with weight. How much is this setup? Of course, it's not going to be the lightest option that you could build this bike up to, because first of all, it's using rather deep section wheels, especially the 65 on the rear. Then it is using the l-twoo ERX group set, which is rather comparable weight-wise, I would say, to a 105 Di2 group set, so it's also not the lightest. We have the FSA stem in here, so it's also heavier than you could go with, for example, a fully integrated cockpit. And then we're also having the 105 crankset. So yeah, these have been the components that I had either at home or quick access to, like for example with that stem from FSA. But if I'm going to be riding this bike and it turns out that I really love it, I think this could easily turn into another kind of weight weenie aero bike build. But now let's weigh it. Reset to 0, put the loop around here. Let's make sure it's still at 0, yeah. Okay, let's pull up the bike. Ah, come on. 7.15 kilogram. I gotta say, that is really impressive for an aero frame with a rather cheap group set on it. I mean, the l-twoo ERX and the 105 crankset, I think they're known for not being the lightest. We also got the 65mm deep section wheel in the back. So yeah, I would say let's see how this thing rides. I hope that in the next weeks the weather is going to turn from sad and rainy and depressive to at least a couple of sunny days where I can take this out on a test ride. And then, yeah, I mean, depending on how I feel about it, there might be some tuning projects coming up in the future. So yeah, if you have any questions or comments in regards to this frame or this build, any components that I've been using, or if you've spotted some mistakes or things that I could do better during that build, definitely drop them down in the comments. I'm definitely thankful for any kind of feedback, and if there are questions, I'll try to get back to you as quickly as possible, as long as I know the answer. If I don't know, I'll try to get hold of that information. So yeah, as always, thanks a lot for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button, consider subscribing, because there's more of that kind of content coming up soon with a very special titanium build, because that frame arrived a couple days ago as well. So I think exciting projects coming up. So yeah, again, thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.